We are only 5 days away from Christmas. For some of you, that means you only have 4 shopping days left. Now, this year has kind of snuck up on us. We're still not done. We're usually done by now, but we still have a few things we need to get. Maybe you're the same way, I don't know. But this year has been just a little bit unusual. So it's okay. Even if you get your gift late, just be thankful. You know it's coming. Maybe you'll open it up New Year's Eve instead of Christmas Eve. But I'm going to ask that you would take your Bible and turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 2. Matthew, chapter 2. And I'm going to be reading the first 12 verses of Matthew, chapter 2. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And gathering together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah. For from you will come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and determined from them the exact time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go, search carefully for the child, and when you have found him, report to me, so that I too may come and worship him." After hearing the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went on ahead of them until it came to a stop over the place where the child was to be found. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And after they came into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. They opened up their treasures and presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And after being warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. Now, I just want to point out that there is nowhere in this passage that we are told there were 3. I know that is our tradition. I know we sing, "We Three Kings of Orient," and you can still sing that. It's okay. There might have been 3. I'm just saying we don't know. The Bible doesn't say there was 3. Probably there was more than 3. In that day when they traveled in a caravan. And it wasn't a minivan caravan, it was a camel caravan. And they traveled in large groups. So you can imagine that these important men and the treasures that they were carrying, they would have most likely had a few bodyguards along. They would have had some servants with them. It would have been a large group that made that journey. But we are told that they were also not kings. Now that might put a damper on your song. They were magi, wise men, more accurately, astronomers. These magi were men who studied the heavens, the stars. And again, we're not told, but what we do see is that on one particular night, there was something different that appeared in the heavens that they had not seen before. There was something that caused them to say, "Look at that. We have never seen a star like that. What does it mean? What's it about?" And they determined that it could only mean one thing. A new king had been born in Israel. Now, we are not told how they determined that. How did they see that star and it come into their mind, that has to be the king of Israel? How did they figure that out? We're not told, but I have a theory. There is a historical record from an ancient document that records a time when a Babylonian king had a dream that bothered him. So he called for his wise men to come and to give him the interpretation of the dream. And that was not uncommon. That was not unusual for the wise men to be called into the king and the king to lay out the situation, and then they would tell the king what they thought it meant. And they did the same thing this time. But this dream bothered the king so much that he wanted the real answer so badly that he said to them, "Unless you tell me the dream I had, I will not believe your interpretation." Now, at this point, the wise men were like, "Are you kidding me? How do we know what you dreamed? We can't do that, king." The king got upset and, paraphrasing, basically said, "What good are you? What good are you to me?" And he issued an order for them to be killed. Let me read, picking up what was recorded of this situation. This is the king. "The command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb." Okay, that doesn't sound pleasant. "Not only that, your houses will be turned into a rubbish heap. But if you declare the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts and a reward and great honor. Therefore, declare to me the dream and its interpretation." They answered a second time and said, "Let the king tell the dream to his servants, and we will declare the interpretation." The king replied, "I know for certain that you are trying to buy time, because you have perceived that the command from me is firm. That if you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed together to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the situation is changed. Therefore tell me the dream, so that I may know that you can declare to me its interpretation." The Chaldeans answered the king and said, "King, there is no person on earth who could declare the matter to the king, because no great king or ruler has ever asked anything like this of any soothsayer, priest, sorcerer, or Chaldean. Moreover, the thing which the king demands is difficult, and there is no one else who could declare it to the king except God's, whose dwelling place is not with mortal flesh." How interesting that these wise men knew that no mortal man could provide what the king demanded. They said, only gods who don't dwell with mortal flesh can know what the king dreamt. If only one of them had known the living God. If only one of them knew the God who would come to be called Emmanuel, God with us. Let me continue the story. The king became angry, extremely furious. He gave orders to kill all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued that the wise men be killed, and they looked for Daniel and his friends. By now you should realize that the ancient book I am speaking of is the Bible. The king is Nebuchadnezzar. And one of the wise men about to be killed was the Old Testament prophet named Daniel. You may remember several stories about Daniel. You may remember Daniel when he was first taken captive, would not eat of the king's table, and how God blessed him for that. You may remember the story of his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who would not bow to the golden idol and were thrown into the fiery furnace, only for the Son of God to meet them there and deliver them. You may remember the story of Daniel, where his peers could find no accusation against him because he was a man of integrity and character. And that the only cause that they could bring against Daniel was that he was a man of faith that served God and prayed regularly. And so they connived a law that made it illegal for Daniel to pray to God. But Daniel did not cease praying. And he was thrown into the den of lions. Once again, God spared his life, sent an angel and closed the mouths of the lions, and Daniel lived. We may remember those, but you may not have ever thought about this aspect of Daniel's life. Daniel not only served the Babylonian Empire, he served the empire that came after, the Persian Empire. God was with Daniel throughout his entire life. Thankfully, Daniel had that relationship with the living God. Thankfully, he called his Hebrew friends to come together and to pray and to seek the face of God for an answer. And thankfully, God heard and answered the prayers of his servants. When God gives that answer, Daniel requests to have an audience with the king. And this is what Daniel says. Daniel answered before the king and said, "As for the secret about which the king has inquired, neither wise men, sorcerers, soothsayer priests, nor diviners are able to declare it to the king." Now this sounds very much like what the other magi had said. King, you're asking something too hard for a man. No one can do it. And I'm sure as the king is sitting there, he's probably going, oh no, not another one. Just like the other guys. However, Daniel doesn't stop there, and he says this. However, there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. And he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the latter days. This was your dream and the visions in your mind while on your bed. As for you, O king, while on your bed, your thoughts turn to what would take place in the future. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will take place. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me for any wisdom residing in me more than in any other living person, but for the purpose of making the interpretation known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts of your mind. What I like about this is how Daniel speaks to the king. Daniel prays to God for an answer. God gives the answer. Daniel goes in before the king, knowing the answer, knowing the king will be pleased. But Daniel does not take any credit to himself. Instead, he witnesses to the king of who the God in heaven is. He could have very easily said, okay, king, I got the answer, and I can't wait till you give me some riches, just like you promised. None of your other guys could do it. I'm the man. I'm the one. So I'm waiting for the honor. May we learn from that. That when God uses us, when God allows us to have an impact and an influence in someone else's life, that we dare not take the credit to ourselves. For without God we can do nothing. May we give him all the glory and all the honor and all the praise. As a result of Daniel's humility, God did raise him up. We're told that. God will raise up, he will exalt the humble, but not the proud. The proud he will put down. As a result of Daniel's humility, God raised him up to a place of power and honor and prestige. We read this: then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face. Now after Daniel gives him tells him the dream and the interpretation, King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face. Kings don't do that. Kings are used to people falling on their face before them. Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and paid humble respect to Daniel. Are you kidding me? The guy who was on the death watch, the king is now bowing before Daniel. And he gave orders to present to him an offering, an incense. The king responded to Daniel and said, your God truly is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets. Since you have been able to reveal this secret. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Do you see what happened there? Daniel, because he knew the living God, because he served the living God, because he honored the living God, because he bore witness to the living God, God exalted him. King Nebuchadnezzar was not a Jewish king. He was a Gentile king. He was polytheistic, believed in many gods. Daniel is bearing witness that he is a servant of the Most High God. There is only one God in heaven. He is the God of all gods. And now Nebuchadnezzar realizes this. Nebuchadnezzar makes this confession that there is no God like the God that Daniel serves. That's significant. And Daniel is placed in charge of all the wise men of Babylon. Now to my theory. It's not original to me. There are many people who hold this theory. But I believe that Daniel, as a servant of the Most High God, as the head of the wise men of Babylon, would have taught those under him about who God is. I mean, don't you think it would make sense that as Nebuchadnezzar makes this pronouncement, there is no God like the God Daniel serves. And all of a sudden, Daniel is elevated in position and power and prestige. Don't you think the other wise men would have been like, whoa, we were about to be, but this guy stepped in with the answer. And it was right. It was the right answer. He must have some kind of an in we don't have. He must be tapped into some power source we don't know about. And so I believe that over the next however many years, Daniel would have been teaching those under him about who the God of heaven is. And about the holy scriptures that Daniel knew. That they would have been learning what the Old Testament prophets had said. Now this would have been roughly a little over 500 years before Jesus was born. And so we fast forward to our Christmas story, where these wise men from the east see a star and say, that must signify the birth of the Messiah, the King of Israel. How would they have known that? I believe because Daniel taught them. And because they were so strong in that day of passing down teaching, recorded teachings, that the wise men of the day when Jesus was born as a babe would have remembered the things that Daniel initiated over 500 years earlier. Remember that. In every opportunity you have to be faithful to the Lord in what you do. Do not overlook an opportunity. Be faithful to God. If He gives you an opportunity to speak to someone, speak to them. Let them know the truth. Tell them what you know. Tell them what you've experienced. You don't have to be able to answer every one of their questions. All you need to do is bear witness to what Christ has done for you. That's what it is to be a witness. What has Jesus done for you? How has He changed your life? You be that witness to the people around you and allow God to work out details and ordain times and circumstances. That's what He does. Your faithfulness today, your witness for Christ today, may result in great blessings for generations to come. You do not know how your testimony today in the life of someone may affect not only their life today, but the future generations of their family to follow. I stand here today because I had a grandfather who was born in Italy and came to America. And the family that was his host family, now my grandfather was Roman Catholic in Italy. And when he came to America, the host family that he stayed with was born again Pentecostal. And they took him to church. And he got saved. So that by the time he brought his wife and my father and uncles over to America after he was settled, they come over and Grandpa says, in Italy we were Roman Catholic. In America we're Christian. This is the church. This is who we are. You see, it was the influence of that host family that has impacted generations beyond just my grandfather. Likewise, the impact of what you do. You do not know how far down the road God will use what you do today. We do not know the simple thing we did last night of just telling the Christmas story and who may have driven through and who may have heard the words. How that impacted them last night, but how it may impact them going forward and their children and their children's children. The wise men saw the star and they said, we need to go. We need to go and worship this king. Again, I can't help but believe that Daniel was teaching them some things. We're not told it specifically, but I believe he had to teach them that there was going to be a great ruler. There had been many kings born in Israel over 500 years. But the significance of that star, the significance of what those magi had been trained to look for, God put a sign for them. See, God will always reach out to those who have a heart to know Him. He will always provide something that will bear testimony and witness of who He is, because He's not willing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. And he puts that up there, and they see it, and they say, that has to be the sign. Not only is it just another child being born, not only is it even just another child in the kingly line being born, this is the King, the Messiah. And we need to go worship him. We need to go find him and worship him. Now, before we think that they just jumped in their car and yelled road trip, it was no small feat to put together a caravan that would travel from Babylon, roughly maybe the land of where Iraq, Iran, in that area, and to travel all the way, again, no planes, no buses, walking, riding, plan that whole thing to get to Israel. They needed food and supplies for both man and animal. They had to prepare. Hey, if we're going to worship, we need to bring something. Like, we're not just going there to see him and then walk away. This is big. What are we going to bring? And they decide that they're going to take of their own treasures and bring those along. They didn't know how long the journey would take. They didn't know how long it would be till they were able to make it back home. And they went through all of this planning. They went through all of this effort, all of the expense to seek out a child just for the honor and delight of seeing him, that they might bow and worship and give him gifts, expecting nothing in return. I wonder how many of us would have been willing to plan and participate in such a trip, knowing that it's going to take more than 15 minutes, knowing you were going to have to give up an unspecified amount of time, knowing that if you made this choice, you were going to miss out on some things. You might miss out a few weeks of watching football. You might miss out on a few family functions. How important would it be for you to get to this king? Not only that, you'd have to spend your own money to get there. And then once you get there, you leave behind precious and valuable treasure. And you didn't even know exactly what was going to happen once you got there. I started thinking about the desire these men had and the effort they put into seeking the baby Jesus. Wasn't a baby. At the time that they arrived, he was a child, probably between 1.5 and 2 years old. And I wondered, what am I willing to do today to seek King Jesus? What sacrifices am I willing to make to express how important he is in my life? What effort am I willing to put into it? And would I come with no expectation of what he could do for me other than just to see him? Some challenging thoughts there. 1 Chronicles chapter 16 says this: let the heart of those who seek the Lord be glad. Be glad. Not sorrowful. Oh, I guess I got to seek God again. No, let the heart of those who seek the Lord be glad. Seek the Lord and his strength. Seek his face continually. There's nothing wrong with seeking him with the awareness that God wants to give us strength. He's made precious promises to us, to those who seek him. Just know that when you seek the Lord, it will result in your gladness. How many of you remember playing a game called hide and seek? Yeah. Some of the young people are like, what? Is that an app? What is that? No. No, there is no hide and seek app as far as I know. Notice that the game is called hide and seek. It's not called hide and just stand there till something happens. It's hide and seek. The point of the game is that the seeker must put forth the effort in seeking out the other players. You have to go to the places where someone would be hiding and try and find them. You have to seek before you can find. Deuteronomy 4:29 says this, "But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him, if you search for him with all your heart and all your soul." Now understand this. God is not playing some type of heavenly hide and seek with us, where he finds a place to hide and we've got to try and seek him out. He's not playing that game. I mean, let's face it, if he wanted to hide, we'd never find him. I mean, he knows all the good places. In fact, the opposite is true. God makes it clear that when you seek him, you will find him. In fact, he wants you to find him. He wants you to come to him. He wants you to know him. But you must seek him in the right way and in the right places. There's also another difference between seeking the Lord and playing the game hide and seek. In the game, the person who is it is the seeker. The seeker is really the one in control. If you're the seeker, the entire game rests on you and what you do. I remember playing hide and seek one time, and I had found a pretty good hiding place. And I was like, they will never find me here. And you know what? They didn't. But you know the problem I ran into? They quit. They quit trying to find me, and I didn't know it. And I'm sitting there, and after a while, you're kind of like, is the game still going on? Like, is this some mean trick they're playing on me? But the seeker had quit. They had given up. They couldn't find me, and they were like, what's the use? I'm going to go do something else. Parents, if you have some young children and you need a few moments alone, I recommend playing the game hide and seek. You be the seeker, and you say, okay, you go and hide, and I'll try and find you. You should get at least 15 minutes of quiet from that, okay? Just a little wisdom there. But it is not that way with God. The seeker is not the one in charge. The Lord is able to even know our thoughts, so we're not in charge. And if one decides that they don't want to seek God anymore, it's actually the seeker who is in danger of being left alone in the darkness. Away from the direction, away from the provision, away from the blessings that come to those who continue to seek the Lord. In 1 Chronicles 28, David speaks to his son Solomon, and he says this, "As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father, and serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands every intent of the thoughts. If you seek him, he will let you find him. But if you forsake him, he will reject you forever." There are many other verses that talk about seeking the Lord and the benefit of that. Jesus talked about seeking first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all the other things we need for life will be taken care of by God for us. But He is to be the focus of our seeking. Are you seeking harder for something that is temporary than that which is eternal? Many people seek for the things of this world. Sometimes that can creep into our lives even as Christians, as believers in Jesus. We have to be on guard. Sometimes we can get wrapped up into what's happening around us and the things and how other people's choices and decisions impact us, and we can get wrapped up in that. When God is still calling us, put your eyes on me. Seek me. I'll let you find me. And all the things that you need, I'm going to take care of those things. You need to know that your life is in my hands. You need to know that your life, that I'm planning it out, that I'm ordaining the events of your life. You need to know that. God is calling us. He's pulling for us. Come and seek me, and you'll find me. Colossians 3 says this, therefore, if you have been raised up with Christ, keep seeking the things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. At this point, I trust all of us know that we are to be seeking the Lord, that we at least know that. But how do you do that? We see part of how we do that in this passage. First, be on guard. Don't let your mind be consumed with earthly things. Not that you aren't aware of them. Not that you're not touched by them. I'm not talking about going through life with blinders on that somehow we're not in touch with reality. It's not what I'm saying. God is saying, yes, those things are there. God knows what we have need of. God knows what you are going through. Scripture tells us He is a man who is acquainted with our sufferings. He knows who we are. He knows what you can handle. He knows what's ahead for you. He knows the strength that you need. He knows the provision that you need. He knows the direction that you will need. But you will only find it if you seek Him. He has it for you. He has what you need. He has it. But seek Him. Seek the things which are above. Learn God's ways and live your life accordingly. Focus upon what God has said rather than what the popular way of thinking in our society is. To make it as simple as possible, if you want to find the Lord, you must seek Him. And to seek Him with all your heart requires your obedience to His commands. You see, when we are seeking Him, it's not just coming and kneeling down for 5 minutes and saying, God, I'm seeking you. There's more to it than that. The Magi came to seek out the King who was born. It wasn't a 5-minute, I don't see Him. All right, let's go back home. It was a commitment. It was a passion. It was the drive of their lives to find this child. And if we are going to be seekers of the Lord, it must be the same. We must recognize there is a commitment. There is a commitment of time. There is a commitment of our talents. There is a commitment of our treasures. But when we seek Him with all of our heart, we will find Him. And when we find Him, we will have the greatest treasure that a human being can ever know. If you are not experiencing the peace of God in your life, Now, I know that can have a variety of meanings. Sometimes we think peace means simply that everything is going our way. Turmoil. That there's no trial. That there's nothing coming against us. But that is not what the peace of God is. The peace of God is knowing He is with you in the midst of all those things. That you can endure those things, that you can stand strong and faithful and bold and confident because you know your God is with you. And yes, there are times where life gets crazy and hectic, and trials are hurtful, and questions enter our mind. Why? I just want to encourage you in those moments, lift your eyes heavenward, from whence cometh your help. And cry out to the God who will let you find Him, who sees where you're at, who knows what you're going through, and calls you to come to Him. And He's just waiting for you to do that. It is a true statement that wise men and women still seek Him today. The wise still seek Him today. And I encourage you, be a wise man, be a wise woman, and choose to seek the Lord, because you know when you do, you will find Him. Let's bow our heads.